December 7th, 1941. It's a calm Sunday morning in Hawaiian paradise, and then the sky explodes. Sirens cut through the chaos as the U.S. Pacific Fleet, the proud symbol of American power, burns in the waters of Pearl Harbor. In just a couple of hours, more than 2,400 American lives are lost, and a nation is thrown into a state of shock. On the other side of the world, President Franklin D. Roosevelt gets the news. The attack wasn't just a military disaster. It was an even bigger political test. For years, America had been a deeply, bitterly divided nation. The powerful America First movement still haunted by the memory of World War I, argued fiercely for staying out of another bloody European war. The country was completely fractured, committed to neutrality even as the world was catching fire. But on December 8, 1941, President Roosevelt would stand before Congress and deliver a speech that lasted less than 7 minutes. Speech so powerful it would dissolve years of division in an instant. So how did one man, in just a few hundred words, unite a divided America and unleash its full fury on the world? This is the story of the address that changed World War II. To really get the power of Roosevelt's words, you have to understand the world he was speaking to. The late 1930s were a time of crippling anxiety. Hitler's war machine had steamrolled across Europe, leaving Great Britain to stand almost alone. In the Pacific, the Empire of Japan was on a brutal campaign of its own, carving a path through China and eyeing its European rivals' colonies. America watched all of this from a distance, shielded by two massive oceans and a deep-seated desire to stay out of it. The trauma of the First World War and its horrific casualties had created a powerful wave of isolationism. Big names like Charles Lindbergh championed the America First Committee, arguing that the United States had no business getting tangled up in Europe's problems. This wasn't some fringe movement. It was a huge part of the American public that believed the country's own problems, like the Great Depression, were far more important than any fight overseas. But President Roosevelt saw the growing danger. He believed that if the Axis powers dominated Europe and Asia, America would become a fortress, isolated in a hostile world. So he took steps to help the Allies, like the Lend-Lease Act, which sent critical war supplies to Great Britain and turned the U.S. into the arsenal of democracy. These moves were controversial, though, and carefully tiptoed around the neutrality acts that Congress had passed to keep America out of war. That's where things stood on December 7th. A nation fighting with itself. A president trying to prepare an unwilling public for a war he saw coming. And a world on the verge of collapse. And all this time, diplomatic talks with Japan were still happening. Just an hour after the first bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese ambassador gave a formal reply to a recent American proposal. The message said that negotiations were useless, but gave no hint of the devastating attack already underway. This detail became the cornerstone of the betrayal America felt, the sense that peace talks had been a sham. The shock wasn't just the military destruction. It was the complete shattering of America's sense of security. The question was no longer if America would go to war, but how a president could possibly unite a fractured people to fight it. On the evening of December 7th, facing the worst day of his presidency, Franklin Roosevelt knew the next day's speech couldn't just be a policy update. It had to be a rallying cry. He called in his secretary and started dictating, not from a long-winded draft prepared by the State Department, but from the gut. He knew he wasn't just speaking to Congress, he was speaking to the largest audience in American radio history, with an estimated 81% of American homes tuned in. They were angry, scared, and looking for a leader. The speech he created is a masterclass in persuasion, built to stir emotion, create moral clarity, and jolt a nation into action. Let's break down what made it so powerful. First, that unforgettable opening. Roosevelt's first draft began yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in world history. But with a simple pencil stroke, he made one of the most famous edits of all time. He crossed out world history and replaced it with one perfect word: infamy. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Infamy was a loaded choice. It doesn't just mean famous. It means being known for an evil act. With uncoopsis of. By using the passive voice, the United States of America was tacked. Roosevelt brilliantly cast America as the victim of an unprovoked assault, driving home a sense of violated innocence. Second, Roosevelt built his case with a powerful, rhythmic list of aggressions. He didn't just mention Pearl Harbor. He laid out the full, coordinated scope of the Japanese offensive. He listed the attacks one by one. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. And this morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. It's like a drumbeat, growing louder and more menacing with each line. The repetition transforms the attack from an isolated event into a sweeping campaign of conquest. It told every American, from California to Maine, that this wasn't some distant problem. The danger was spreading, and it was aimed right at them. Third, the speech masterfully contrasts Japanese deceit with American honor. Roosevelt hammers home that the attack happened while the U.S. was at peace and talking with Japan toward the maintenance of peace. He paints a picture of a nation acting in good faith only to be tricked by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. This narrative of betrayal was key. It turned the debate from a political argument about isolationism into a simple moral choice between good and evil. There was no middle ground. Finally, the speech pivots from past grievance to future resolve. After laying out all the evidence, Roosevelt's tone shifts from somber outrage to steel-boned determination. He invokes American power and morality, declaring, "No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory." That wasn't a request, it was a promise. The phrase righteous might framed the coming war as a moral crusade, with a direct and undeniable command. That the Congress declared that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. After building such an ironclad case, this wasn't just a suggestion, was the only honorable path forward. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. Just 33 minutes after Roosevelt finished speaking, Congress voted to declare war on Japan. The vote was nearly unanimous. The only no came from Representative Jeanette Rankin of Montana, a committed pacifist who had also voted against America's entry into World War I. Her single vote was a stark contrast to the tidal wave of unity that had just crashed over the nation. Across the country, the effect was just as profound. It was like the deep divisions that had defined America for years just evaporated overnight. The America First movement dissolved, and its leaders pledged to support the war. Recruiting stations were flooded with volunteers from all walks of life, lining up to enlist. The shock of Pearl Harbor, focused through the moral clarity of Roosevelt's speech, had transformed a nation of reluctant observers into a unified powerhouse. The phrase "a date which will live in infamy" became a national rallying cry and a permanent symbol of American resolve. Things moved quickly after that. 3 days later, on December 11th, Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, declared war on the United States. Congress immediately returned the favor. Just like that, America was in a global war, fighting across both the Atlantic and the Pacific. The age of isolationism was over. The legacy of the Day of Infamy speech is so much bigger than World War II. It became the blueprint for presidential leadership in a time of crisis. It showed how powerful, direct, and morally focused words could unite a diverse and divided nation toward a single goal. The speech is a touchstone for how to communicate with a shocked and grieving public while steeling them for the fight ahead. It forever cemented December 7th in the American memory, not just as a day of tragedy, but as the moment a sleeping giant was awakened. From the ashes of Pearl Harbor, a new America was born, unified, determined, and aware of its place on the world stage. Franklin D. Roosevelt's speech on December 8, 1941, was the crucible where that change happened. He didn't just report on a tragedy, he interpreted it. He took the nation's raw shock and anger and forged it into a shared resolve that would fuel a global war effort and change the course of the 20th century. The speech was short and to the point, but its power came from its moral certainty and its unshakable promise of ultimate victory. It remains one of the most important speeches in history, a testament to the idea that in the darkest of times, the right words can make all the difference. What do you think was the most powerful part of Roosevelt's speech? Let us know in the comments below. And for more deep dives into the speeches that shaped history, make sure to subscribe.